Good morning. You're listening to the BLAINESWORLD show, heard each Wednesday here on WPVM LP 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen online at WPVM.org and watch on WPVM's Facebook page. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield. I'm here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week, we focus on the Asheville theater scene, as well as on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And to that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my first guest, and he is Mark Jones. Welcome aboard, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, and it's hard to kind of describe Mark Jones or what he does because he does just about everything, or especially when it comes to theater. And it used to be that you'd say Mark Jones, from Asheville Community Theater, but now Mark Jones is at heart, he's, you name it, you'll see Mark somewhere in town. In addition, he works downtown at, where do you work downtown? Can we share that?
Hotel Indigo,
Okay.
Asheville downtown.
So it seems, Mark, if there ever was a perfect job for you, that just seems the perfect job for you, be downtown where all the action is. Mark has actually been working in theater for the last 30 years. Okay, what started at the age of 3? Was that it, or 2?
Yeah, I wish. No, I did do some theater in elementary school, but I don't really I don't count that in my, when I say 30 years.
Well, I'll ask you a question. I maybe asked you this before, but nobody's taken me up on this idea, Mark, for a fundraiser. And that has to do with your first production. You said you did some stuff in elementary school. Do you remember what the first thing you ever were in?
I do. It was the show was called A Chew, like a chew,
right?
The Mouse That Saved Christmas. And it was about a little mouse that was allergic to cheese. And his buddies all teased him for that because, what mouse is allergic to cheese? And there was an evil cat that was going around trying to ruin Christmas by lighting fires in the fireplaces so Santa could not come. Well, guess who saved the day by sniffing cheese and sneezing out the fires? That was a chew. And I was a chew. So
how old were you?
I believe it was the 3rd grade.
Now, here's
however old people are in the 3rd grade, I don't know how old. I don't remember how old I was.
Here's the question: does anybody have a record of that?
There are a couple of photographs of it. Okay. And before my elementary school was torn down many, many, many years ago, I did manage to secure an actual music book. So the script / music from that show. So I still have the book. So that show could make a revival if I chose to do so.
Well, you laugh. Here's the idea, Mark, and I've spoken to several people about it, but I think we should do a fundraiser. I don't care if it's for Hart, I don't care if it's for Asheville Community Theater. I may have told you this before, but everybody would do their first role.
Oh gosh,
you see, the talent shows you've seen, you put on a great musical at Hart, but this would be everybody recreating their first role. So especially if they don't have a tape of it, or they don't have a clip of it, here you could have a record of it that you perform this. Wouldn't that be fun?
A 47-year-old man singing.
No, but wouldn't it be fun though?
It would be. Yeah. Although I count my first role truly as when I did in high school, my freshman year when we did Grease.
Okay.
That was my first full-fledged musical performance, and I played Duty, so I got to sing those magic changes, and so I do count that. And that one was recorded. It's actually on YouTube. One of our high school students put the whole show on YouTube. So I own it on VHS as well. But yeah.
What you mean? Remember, there's something called VHS. People actually had. Do you even have a VCR recorder?
I do not.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to put it on or a DVD or something.
Yes, exactly.
But can you imagine that people actually did Grease? One of the things that's cool about you, Mark, is that you've also done several shows, and Grease may have been one of them. We've done it more than once. Is that correct?
Grease is not one of them.
No,
yes,
but
I have.
You've done Hairspray, right?
Hairspray I've only done one time.
Only one time?
Yeah, that was, I believe, 2013 when I played Corny Collins.
Okay, and boy, did you hit that too.
That was a fun role, yeah.
But it's incredible because there are certain roles, Mark, and I can mention to you, I've told you that I'm almost disappointed that you're now getting into directing so heavily because I just love watching you as an actor. And there are certain roles that are perfect for you. And that was, I thought, a perfect role for you. It's just.
It was in many ways. As we talk about, I don't perform as much anymore. I like the roles that are kind of walk-on roles, I call them, where you have like a song or two, couple of scenes, and you're done. So the last couple of shows I've done have been like that. I mean, I was in Addams Family as Lurch, which I had no lines, and only sang at the very, very, very end. But I was on stage a lot, but it was just kind of a walk-on memorable role. Footloose, I was Cowboy Bob, so I had one song, and that was it. I love that kind of stuff. I mean, but talking about multiple roles, I have done Little Shop of Horrors 5 times, 3 as an actor and 2 as a director in the directing aspect. And I've done Cabaret 3 times.
Okay, well, and by the way, that's another show that's like perfect for you. It's just what's really cool watching you perform, Mark, is that whatever you roll in, including Lurch, is a good example. It's just you really hit it. Saying that, that was a fun thing to see you perform.
That goes in. That's in history as one of my favorite roles that I've ever played. I remember when it was first announced, and I was like, I want to be Lurch in that show. And everyone's like, but Lurch doesn't say anything. He doesn't have. I'm like, who cares? I was like, people will remember you, and I get to do all that makeup and change my. As an actor, I like to play roles that are not me. So, and Lurch was completely opposite of. I mean, like I was unrecognizable in that role.
Do you have a favorite
with the
role?
Haircut and the makeup and everything.
Do you have a favorite role?
Do I have a favorite role?
Yeah.
It's so hard. I mean, Buddy Holly is a role that I'm identified with. I'm much older than that now, so I don't think I would ever go back and do that show. But that's a role that I got easily identified with when I did the show. So that was a favorite. I mean, the Tin Man was a favorite role of mine in Wizard of Oz, but I'd wanted to do that role for a very, very long time. And I mean, I did Seymour 3 times, so I love Seymour and Little Shop of Horrors.
Here's another one I'll ask you about that you did, and I think you only did it once. That was the show you did it with Bradshaw, the 2-person show. What's the name of that again?
The Story of My Life.
Oh boy, I hope will that someday be done again, you think?
It's been tossed around a few times. You just have to find, and with the whole idea that with moving forward in theater, with doing smaller shows, there's always the potential that could come back, and that may possibly Bradshaw and I could do it again. We're much older now than when we did it before, so I would love to do that show again. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful show.
And here was a point you made off the air, and we'll talk a little bit about it now, was the fact that because COVID, theater is changing, and that you telling me, for example, we're going to talk about an upcoming show you're doing, and if you can mention it, it's very exciting. If you can mention it now, the Joseph show.
Yes, we're moving forward with some shows at Haywood Arts Regional Theater. We are talking about doing Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat in the late summer, end of August, 1st of September, and right now, I mean, we're moving forward with it. But we are waiting until July to make the final decision as to how the show is going to happen, or where it's going to happen, and whether it's going to be indoors or outdoors, or whether the cast will be socially distanced, or whether we won't be wearing masks anymore, or I mean, there's so many things coming down, with the governor of North Carolina changing things, and every week something changes, so that by the time we roll to my show at the end of the summer, who knows where we'll be standing when it comes to social distancing and safely doing something, because that's the main goal, is to do it safely. So,
and even as a director, it must pose a challenge for you, because you were telling me originally Joseph and the Technicolor Dream had how many people in the cast?
We had about 32 people in the cast when I cast it, when it was supposed to have happened last year.
Now, is that tough, cutting it down?
It is. Of course, when the year changed, I mean, some of the people automatically just dropped out because their life is different this year than it was last year, and they're not going to be. Some of the kids were in high school last year, but they're now going off to college, so we lost them. Colleges are not always, they're not on campus anymore, so they don't, if they're not living in this area, as they can't do the show because they won't be here. So the cast size dropped automatically on its own without me having to really do much. I've actually had to fill in a couple of roles with people that weren't available last year that are now available this year. So it's going to shaping up to be a good cast, and I'm excited about the potential of doing it. But it is hard to start directing it or getting it ready because I don't know truly right now how I'm going to be able to do it yet. So I'm just tossing around ideas in my head and trying to get some concepts and some visuals, and just so that I'm ready to go when I get that go ahead with this is how we're going to do it. So
yeah, your career is kind of an interesting one because I've been in Asheville now, over 10 years. And I, of course, knew you originally as a performer. And I think I've seen just about everything you've ever been in. But over the last several years now, you've moved, I guess, not even so slowly, but more into the directing area of things. And do you have a preference, performing or directing?
right now it's directing. The performing happens if it's a role that I really, really want to play. But I've been directing since 2006, where I started with my first show and proceeded, and it just kept getting more and more. But the acting, I've grown up, I've gotten older. So a lot of the roles that I used to want to play, I'm too old to play now. So you kind of have to, we were talking about this the other day with some friends, that your dream roles change. So everyone's like, what's your dream role? And I'm like, well, when I was younger, it used to be, Huck Finn in Big River, and and now I'm just way too old to play that role. So I start to look at the dad roles. I'm like, oh, I can be the dad in this, or I can be the dad in that, or everyone's like, oh, you should do Music Man, you'd be great in that. And I'm like, yeah, but performing is just too hard for me. I prefer to direct, and it's a more creative side that I like to put out there.
Do you have a
And
dream
then
role?
just hold off for the roles that that call out to me, that there's no one else that can play it but me.
Do you still have a dream role?
A show that I really have loved ever since I was a kid and saw it is Man of La Mancha.
Oh,
I've always wanted to be Don Quixote. I just think it's a beautiful score to sing Dulcinea and An Impossible Dream, and to play that role would just be a lot of fun. And I'm actually the age that I believe the original actor was when he did it on Broadway. Because people forget, they think, oh, you're not old enough. And I'm like, but it's an actor in his 40s putting on makeup to become an older actor. So that's what people forget, is that it's not an old man. It's a middle-aged actor who's playing an older actor. So
and I guess that's easier to do. It's easier, I guess, to become older on stage than become younger on stage.
yes, it is.
But you were saying you're never too old. I told you off the air, I just read a great article about John Cullum. He's 91, and he had a show planned for Broadway. He was going to do one-man review on Broadway at 89. It got postponed, because of the pandemic. But that's pretty cool, isn't it? That at 91, he's still performing.
Oh yeah.
So,
I believe I'll be directing at that age. I don't know about the performing.
okay.
And my voice has been changing too. We were talking, I was talking about this with Sarah Fowler, one of my friends, and also many time collaborator, musical director. That as you get older, your voice starts to change, and you have to learn a new performing thing. And I'm just not the performer that I used to be, because things are starting to change.
One of the things that's impressed me too about you, Mark, is the fact that, you constantly are kind of moving into new things and new skills. And just this past year, I thank you for something you did at Heart, and I can talk a little bit about that you not only directed a musical review, but you actually filmed it and put it all together.
Well, I edited. I had people that were there with me that filmed it.
Right.
But we did discuss all the, angles and what we were going to do. And then I had to edit it together into one solid production and put the music underneath it and mix it and things like that. So, and that's a new skill that I picked up over the last year, because, we were talking about my microphone actually. When we all thought we were going to be quarantined, and we had no idea how long that was going to be. I took some of the stimulus money and things that I got, and I bought a microphone because I thought, oh, I can record things on my computer and, you know, just do that kind of stuff, singing and things like that. And then I started editing videos together. And the more I did it, the better I became at it. And I'm still learning as I go. So I'm not as, I mean, I'm sure there are people out there that are way better than what I do, but it definitely opened the door to more projects. When people saw my little videos that I did on Facebook, and then started offering me larger videos. So, you know, the heart video was a large project in its own right, but it was only a couple people singing. It was all solos and one duet. But the biggest project was the most recent thing I did for ACT,
Well, and
which
talk
was
about that one. A lot of fun too.
yeah,
Yeah. What was that?
the Seasons of Love project that I just did, which was one video, and there were 35 people in it that all sent me their individual singing videos, and I had to edit them together into one choir of people singing with solos, and that was a really hard project for my computer and for myself.
Now, how'd you pick up that skill? How'd you learn it?
Trial and error, playing around with myself. I mean, last year when I did the 30-day song challenge for
Right.
the just for fun, and then as I started doing my TV theme show song or TV theme song video project that I was doing, I started editing myself together with myself, singing duets with myself, and then I edited myself singing with other people, and then it just kind of, then I would just hit up friends and say, hey, you want to sing a song? And so we did Sweet Caroline by Neil Diamond, and I had about 17 people that agreed to do that, and I just started playing around and just doing that, you know, it just having fun. So
If folks want to learn that skill, some people say, you know, you go to YouTube. Is that a good way to learn skills? Or
yeah,
did you learn it?
I learned how to use, you know, you choose the editing software that you're want to work with. I work with it's called Movavi,
Right.
Movavi, and that was just the one that I found because it was easy to use. And then I just learned new things by watching YouTube videos to see how they do things, and then I play around with it and just, like I said, trial and error until I get what I need. So
No, but it's really came together really well, especially that hot video. It's really fun to watch. What's fun to watch about it, Mark, is, and it's sure more so you than me, but I really have missed theater, you know, and,
yeah,
and you know, I'd be every weekend, I'd see at least one show, if not two. And so for a month, excuse me, a year, I haven't seen anything yet. I've gotten some enjoyment from watching stuff on video. You know, it's been sort of a somewhat replacement, you know, but it's not quite the same thing, you know.
no, and I love the streaming. I mean, I'm so thankful that a lot of these major productions have been streamed,
Right.
from London, or from, not necessarily from Broadway, because they weren't streaming things from Broadway, but London, they had a lot of productions that were filmed and streamed. And there's a wonderful place, and if you have a chance, Blaine, and haven't seen them, there's a wonderful theater in London, in the UK, called Curve, CURVE,
Yeah.
and they did a production of Sunset Boulevard.
Oh, really? Oh,
Which was filmed in their theater, and they used the stage, the audience, the seating, and it was a beautifully staged production, and it was streamed and filmed. And also they just did The Color Purple, and it was a gorgeous production, and I'm so thankful that they were able to do that, so that people like me in North Carolina, and like you in North Carolina, can see this theater, you know, that's being done.
well, yeah, it's funny you say that, because I have discussions with people on theater about this whole issue, and you know, about the idea that if a production runs, about making it available like after the fact or streaming, you know, like on Broadway, it never been heard of, you know, until last year or so. Now all of a sudden, you know, people give the idea that why don't you open it up to the world, you know, and like you mentioned, the two shows, for example. What's your thinking of that streaming shows?
I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to continue. When live theater comes back, streaming will go away. There's a lot of copyright issues with streaming, and laws, and, you know, here in the United States, we have Actors Equity, and there's so many contractual agreements in there involving filming and streaming. And I mean, even this Hamilton that was on Disney Plus, and everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, it's so glad that they did that." The amount of money and contract agreements that go into something like that, every one of those actors had to agree to that. You know, it was in their contracts that this would be filmed, and this was the appropriate amount of money that would be, you know, it's just a huge thing. And you know, with community theater streaming, there are copyright laws and issues, and how many times can you stream it, and you know, can you, I mean, it's just, there's a lot that goes into it, and I just don't see it continuing. You know, the pandemic forced people to find a new way of doing things, and these, we talked about it, you know, off air, the companies that control the rights to the shows, they had to find a new way to make money. And so we're gonna allow streaming rights, you know, but I have a feeling those will go away when live theater comes back, just because it's just a lot of contracts, a lot of copyright issues with streaming, that kind of stuff.
It's funny you mentioned Hamilton, because that was the first show, Mark, after the pandemic, broke, that I signed up for Disney. I think I kept it for one day, and watched it. I was in tears. I can't believe I was crying watching this recorded version of a show. But it's just the first thing I'd seen in so long. And it was really, it was very impressive. Yet, if you get a chance, I'll mention to any listeners also, take a look on Facebook. I set up a page called Entertainment. And it's just kind of an interesting thing where I post articles, and I think you're on it now. But I post an article about this whole streaming discussion and how Broadway is looking at it. And it's a chance for some people. And somebody who wrote the article was disabled, and she said it was a great way for her to see stuff where she ordinarily couldn't see stuff. So
Right.
It's something out there. Mark, what do you see happening? Like you said, everything, I guess, is kind of up in the air. So as a director or somebody involved in theater, it must be hard for you to actually plan stuff, what's coming. It's just, I guess you have to be very flexible over the next 6 months to a year.
You do. You have to be very, with your ideas, you have to be flexible, because I could be told in July that I have to socially distance the show and stage it socially distant, which, if you think about it, every actor has to be 6 feet apart from each other. So you have to be very creative to make that work and not make it seem weird. And you just have to be prepared for whatever hits you or whatever comes rolling your way, and not be too stuck on one thing or another. And we're all starting to look at smaller shows, and what show could we do, what's a one-man show I could do, or what's a 2-person show I could do, so that it's easier to perform it safely until we're back into a more normal time.
Like you said, another story has happened at SART, that they had a big show planned, and they had to cut that off because nobody's having big shows anymore. Yet, to the credit, some theaters now are starting to come out, which is really exciting, and start having productions. We mentioned Hayward Arts Regional Theaters having Goodnight Gracie or Goodnight Grace, whatever the show is, coming up. I saw also, I don't know if you saw it, but it was streaming, was at NC Stage. They did the book club play or book club review. Did you see that when they had it?
I did not, no.
Yeah, but it was very exciting because they had actual live actors, performing a show. And what they did was very clever, Mark. You had to actually see it at a specific time, so I've never seen that before, but they actually had all the actors. You had to see it 7:30 on Saturday night, or you couldn't watch it again. So it was only available those 12 times or something. But
so it was a live stream.
It was. And
you were like watching the show as they were doing it right then and there.
Right. Yeah. And they actually did, I think, 12 performances of it, but it was very interesting. And it is different than seeing it, the tape version of it, I guess. That's kind of the difference of it. What do you see, Mark, yourself doing? So aside from you working and you're in the back of your mind, you have the Heart production coming up. Are you working on anything else? Any projects?
I have some video projects that I'm working on that are non-theater related. I'm working on a huge video project for a church conference that's going on this summer that I've been asked to edit another song together for them.
Very exciting.
So like I said, learn a new skill. And my one-man show that I was supposed to do last year, is sitting on the back burner, just waiting for a theater to say, let's do it. That would be Miss Gulch Returns. Miss Gulch being the famous bike riding, dog stealing spinster from The Wizard of Oz, 1939 MGM movie. So there's a one-man show about her. And that will be hopefully coming out either this year or next year. We'll see. I haven't, like I said, there's no specific dates on that yet. Who knows? I may be teaching some theater classes to kids this summer. Lots of things being tossed around, but nothing set in stone or just waiting.
I'm trying to think if I've ever seen you in another one-man show. Have you ever done locally any one-man shows?
Not one man, no. I've been in two. I did John and Jen at 35 Below.
Beautiful show too.
With Kelly. And then I've done some smaller productions of shows, putting it together, and Nonsense Amen, and things like that. But I've never, and actually, we've been tossing around the idea of doing another Nonsense with the men, because that would make some money, because we did really well with that Nonsense that we did in 35 Below. But, there's just things being tossed around. Nothing is set in stone yet. So.
And one thing you do also, Mark, aside from directing, acting, working, doing video work, you also, I know, do a lot of work at Asheville Community Theater with some of the children's programs, right? I know
Yes.
you're active in that too. How do you enjoy that?
I love doing that. A lot of the kids that I have taught in those classes are now in college and off doing wonderful things, and that makes me very happy. And one day, one of those kids is going to walk across the Tony Award stage and accept their Tony and hopefully say thank you. Or mention my name. That'll be enough for me. That'll be enough for me, because I love seeing them, the kids and teenagers that I've worked with, go on to do bigger and better things. So
have you had anybody yet been on Broadway?
No, I have some friends. I know some people that have been on Broadway.
Okay.
Not like from classes that I've taught or anything of that nature. So
the other thing, Mark, that always impresses me with you too is, I think of all the people I know locally, you have the most knowledge about theater than anybody I know. Like, I think you once told me, how many CDs do you have?
It's probably close to, I would say now, close to 1,100 or 1,200.
Is it really?
Cast recordings, yeah.
CDs or
all CDs, yeah. No, I do have a few records from when I was a kid, but I just haven't got on that. I haven't jumped on that record bandwagon yet. Again, I don't want to go back into the vinyl.
You and I have talked about this, that it's really hard getting CDs now. Especially I remember I bought a car, Mark, this dates it, that had to have a cassette player and a CD player. Nobody had cassette player, so they had to have. Remember when they used to have something called cassettes?
Oh yeah, I had cassettes.
Right. And so then they went to CDs. But damn it, Mark, it's almost impossible now. It would become very difficult to get CDs now.
Yeah.
And
everybody's moved to digital.
Yeah, and it's a shame, because I love, you and I have talked about this, I love listening to CDs and collecting them, and you can't hardly buy them anymore. So so the collection, but in addition to the collection, the thing that I get a kick out of is you have this knowledge of theater that you'd be tough to beat in a trivia competition, I would imagine. Are you pretty good when it comes to theater?
I do. I'm pretty well versed. Some of the older stuff I don't know as much about, but I consider myself well versed in shows that come from the 80s and on, and 60s. Well, I guess I should say maybe the 60s, 70s and on, but the older shows like the 40s and the 50s, classic musicals. I know some of them, but I don't know all of them. And we just recently had that competition I was telling you about, the March Madness Broadway edition, which was just something fun we did. But the video was released today, so it is free to say that I did win the competition. And it was a name that tune section of it. There was a Broadway trivia. There was we give you 3 location, year the show came out, and 2 of the top actors, and you have to name the show, that kind of stuff. And it was fun.
Oh,
and the name that tune, I was like, am I going to get it just from that 3 seconds of the song that I'm hearing?
But you have me writing a note to myself, Mark, and I was saying to myself, don't challenge this guy to a trivia contest, so I'll stay away from you. But Mark, if folks want to get in touch with you, find out more about you, what's the best way to keep tabs?
I mean, I'm on Facebook, so chances are a lot of people maybe, I've kind of got my Facebook to a point where if you're not a friend with somebody that I'm a friend with, you probably won't find me.
Right.
But I do need to get a website because I am always talking about this. So I just need to. That's my next goal, is to get myself set up on a website. But with the theaters, Asheville Community Theater or AshevilleTheater.org is one good place to know about what I'm doing or what I'm involved with, and also HeartTheater.org is another place to
and
go.
theater spelled right, with the
Theater
R-E.
spelled the British way.
Okay, exactly.
Or as we talk about, the building, or the art of theater, and the building is an ER and the art of theater is an RE spelling. So,
and lastly, if you want to keep tabs with Mark, you can also check on Facebook the entertainment page we've set up, because you'll see kind of stuff Mark's doing. Mark, I really look forward to seeing you this coming year. It's been too long. Okay, buddy. Speak to you soon.
Yeah.
Okay,
sounds
thanks
good.
again. Thanks again for being my guest on the first half of the Blaine's World Show. As Mark kind of disappears, it's a trick, Mark, see if we can make you disappear. There we go. We're going to have our second guest come and join us in just a second. And I think there he is. Hey, Michael. As Michael's getting set up here, I'll mention that WPVM's mission is to foster community through programming that cultivates dialogue to inform and entertain. The station provides the medium for artists, businesses, community leaders, and nonprofits to share their voice on live radio. Listeners are invited to help support WPVM's efforts by making a tax-deductible contribution. You can do so by going to the website, WPVMFM.org, and looking at the donate option in the upper right-hand side. My second guest is a guest for the second time on the Blaine's World Show, and he is Michael Poandl. Am I pronouncing it correct? Okay, I think I got Poandl correct. And Michael is the Director and Communications Coordinator for an organization called WNCAP, the Western North Carolina AIDS Project. And Michael, what you can do is you can wave to all your fans and friends in Facebook world, and everybody's kind of watching you, so you can say hello to everybody. Great. And Michael is, as indicated, he's communication coordinator, and he's originally from Washington, D.C. Michael Poandl works to get out the word and all the life-saving services WNCAP provides. And let me, I guess, ask you a question, Michael, before I even ask you what WNCAP is all about. How did you get into this field? In other words, you grew up where?
I grew up in Northern Virginia, the suburbs of Washington, D.C.
Okay. And when you grew up in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., did you always know you wanted to be a communications coordinator for a nonprofit organization? Was that your goal as a little kid?
No, as a little kid, no. Actually, as a little kid, I wanted to be an actor. I was always immediately drawn by the arts, and that's what I pursued, in school and shortly after school, before I sort of drifted into nonprofit work.
Because I could see you doing that. Did you? So you did some acting?
Yeah, I did some acting and some directing in DC. I was really interested to hear your conversation with Mark, because it's theater is still, a passion of mine, even though I don't work in it professionally too often.
Because I could just listen to you. I think I told you this off the air. Yeah, but you have this great voice. I think would be terrific for radio, theater, whatever. But so how did you get into nonprofit then? What brought you into getting involved?
Well, so I worked for a time at an organization in DC called Americans for the Arts, and they're sort of advocates in many different ways for arts organizations and independent artists. And I personally worked in the most political branch of that organization, which basically directly lobbied lawmakers to support the National Endowment for the Arts, arts education, other priorities like that. So and I liked working in the nonprofit sector, and I liked feeling like my work was having some kind of impact in the broader community. So when I came to Asheville a few years ago, I pretty much immediately hooked up with WNCAP because they're a great organization doing great work, and have only gotten better, honestly, since I've been there.
And so let's then talk about WNCAP again for the benefit of the folks who don't know about the organization. You've been with them, I think, what, 4+ years, something like that?
Going on 4 years, just about.
And what is WNCAP?
WNCAP, WNCAP, stands for the Western North Carolina AIDS Project, which was founded in 1986 by a group of volunteers here in Asheville. And the idea at that time was providing kind of hospice care services, simple services for people who were dying from AIDS. And of course, at that time, there was such a great amount of stigma and discrimination. There were cases sometimes of nurses not even going into the rooms because they were so scared. They would leave the person's tray outside. WNCAP had a house. We rented a house on Pearson Drive in Montfort in the late 80s and early 90s for people with AIDS who had been kicked out of their apartment, because at that time it was still legal to actually kick out a tenant if you found out they were HIV positive. So in the early days, it was sort of emergency services like that. Over time, over the years, the treatments for HIV have gotten much better. People living with HIV who are receiving proper medical treatment can live lives that are just as long and healthy as anyone else. But of course, there are still all kinds of HIV related services, and that's what WNCAP provides: testing, case management, food delivery, pharmacy services, and that's in 18 counties of Western North Carolina. That's our service area.
So imagine working for WNCAP. You also get a pair of roller skates. Is that it, to get around? I mean, my God, you're covering 18 counties. That's a big territory, isn't it?
It's wild, isn't it?
Wow.
I think one of our case managers told me, and she works in that area, that it can take 4 hours to drive from Murphy, which is in the very southwestern tip of North Carolina, all the way up to Yancey County, which is also part of our area, and Boone.
Because when you mentioned originally, I was thinking to myself, hey, that's good organization, and just serve Asheville, but to serve 18 counties, that's quite a trip. How many people? So Asheville is the headquarters for WNCAP?
It is, yes, I would say our headquarters. Of course, most of us have been working remotely since the beginning of the pandemic. I'm sure we'll get into that. But yes, we're based on Fairview Road in the Oakley neighborhood, although we just today really opened, and this is big. I think I'm breaking news on your show here, Blaine,
Okay.
that WNCAP has opened a second office in Asheville for the first time ever, because we've actually outgrown our space on Fairview Road. And that's going to be in the building right across from the United Way on South
Okay.
French Broad Street.
Oh, very nice.
So it's very accessible with bus lines and, other forms of public transportation.
So in terms of WNCAP servicing the area, talk about what you just mentioned, Michael, the fact that it has changed, though. In other words, last March, everything was going along great, maybe even looking at a second facility, and all of a sudden now you don't go into the office anymore, I assume. Or is the office even open now, or do people go in at all?
So the office on Fairview Road was always open since the beginning of the pandemic. The outside of the office, the parking lot area, was always open. We immediately set up tents and tables so that we could continue primarily our harm reduction work. That's the work of distributing sterile syringes and the anti-overdose medication naloxone. That we felt was a vital service that could not be interrupted, and that we could do safely outside. But in terms of people coming inside the office, whether they're a client or to use the laundry facilities or shower facilities. No, we had to shut that all down. And that's one of many difficulties that COVID has presented to our work in the last year.
I was going to ask you, how was that for you personally in terms of shifting? Because you seem, even the first time I met you, you seem to be a really kind of person-oriented kind of guy, and like working with people. No, and I'm saying that as a compliment.
Yeah, no.
On a one-to-one basis. And here, you can do it via Zoom and I guess phone, whatever, but it's still not quite the same. Would you agree?
I would agree with that. It's, before when you were talking about theater with Mark, I've seen and written about a lot of virtual theater in the past year, and actually some of it was really interesting, and some of it was created specifically for the Zoom format and stuff like that. And so I can appreciate that. And the same thing goes with, keeping up with friends, keeping up with family, but it really is not the same as being in person. I think that's one thing that this year has taught us, is that physical presence is, well, I should say, just for me, this is just a lesson I've taken away, is that physical in-person space is still very important. In a world that we think has gone all digital, I actually think that makes the physical more important.
Well, I was reading just recently the fact that even as we get out of this, if we do, let's keep our fingers crossed, that the physical stuff is going to change, though. In other words, for example, I'm reading and probably will follow that people won't be shaking hands anymore. That'll, no matter 10 years from now, be doing bumps or whatever, but you'll see a lot of less of that. I think you'll see, unfortunately, you'll probably see less hugs, or at least for a long time, you'll see hugs. So that's kind of sad in a way, that things do change, I guess.
It's a new world. Yeah.
So how has it been run, you personally, working out of your home? Like, are you your home now? Is that where you are now?
Yeah, I'm in my home. I'm working from my studio apartment in downtown Asheville. And at least for now, I am, as I said, we just got a second office space, which I can actually walk to from here. So I'll be going in a few times a week, but I think a lot of us are going to stay remote because it's working well.
Well, it's funny you said that, because the first time I met you, I really enjoyed it. You came to the studio, and it was a pleasure to meet you and some of your colleagues.
Likewise.
But boy, it is a convenience, though, to be able to do this from home, and not to have you chip in and park and, get there and just do it at night or do it whenever you want to. So I'm kind of enjoying it, so I if the situation will allow it, I would just soon continue, doing it this way remotely, at least certain things you can do. Talk about Michael, perhaps the big thing you guys are working on now, and that will be happening and won't be happening remotely, but it's one of my favorite events every year. It's a Dine In for Life. Do I have it right? The Dine In for Life?
That's right. That's right.
And what's that?
Well, and you would be right to be a little confused about the name, because the name this year is Dine In for Life. Historically, for the last almost 20 years that it's been in Nashville, we've called it Dining Out for Life.
By the way, and now I know why I was having trouble with it before, because that's it.
Exactly.
I looked at it, I said, wait, that's different. So it used to be Dining Out for Life, right?
Yes. And the reason we changed it this year, well, it goes back to the conversation we were just having about the pandemic changing all sorts of things about our daily life, some of which might go back to, quote, normal after this is over, and some may not. The industry, I think, they were either the hardest hit or right up at the top, is restaurants, specifically local independent restaurants. The big chains,
right,
they've taken a hit in terms of revenue, but they were always going to be fine. But the restaurants that have participated in Dine In for Life, which, if your listeners are not familiar, is a charity event where restaurants agree to donate 20% of their gross revenue to WNCAP or whatever the local HIV/AIDS organization is, right? So in a typical dining out for life year, we'd have over 100 restaurants donating. We would also have volunteers that we call ambassadors going to each of these restaurants and speaking with people about the event,
By the way,
offering, you know.
just as a
I'm
compliment
sorry.
on that, no, I jumped in on you, but that was, I love that fact. Like you said, you not only would go to the restaurant, but that you'd actually meet the ambassadors. And that was such a great thing to really give people a feel for the organization. You know, I just love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that that's the sort of the defining feature of the event, because not only are you, you know, yes, simply by dining out at a restaurant, you are essentially contributing funds to WNCAP. And I should say right off the bat that last year and this year in 2020 and 2021, we are not asking any of the participating restaurants for a donation. And that is in recognition of this wild, unprecedented year that has hit independent restaurants so hard. You know, we're still asking folks to give back to WNCAP if they can, enter a raffle with their donation for 3 amazing prizes, but we are not asking the restaurants for a dime. But we still want people to go out and dine to show our support for how they've given back to us for years.
Well, talk then, Michael, a little bit, as you mentioned, the fact that Dine In for Life then will be a little bit, not a little bit different, it'll be different than in the past. How so?
Right. So first thing, we changed the name to Dine In for Life to emphasize that there are multiple ways to support restaurants this year. You can, you know, take out, you can get delivery, you can dine in, you can even purchase a gift card, all sorts of different ways. The other thing is that we're not asking restaurants for any contribution, as I just mentioned. We're kind of flipping the script this year, you know, instead of the restaurants holding us up, we are trying to hold them up and support them, because especially in Asheville and WNC, restaurants really are the backbone of this community. They're always the ones that are giving back to small nonprofits like us. Again, the big chains, you know, not really going to care as much about the local guy in the community or the local nonprofit down the street. But so those are the two big changes. And talking about the ambassadors as well, this year, obviously not doing in-person ambassadors because we want to be safe. Instead, we're asking people to be virtual ambassadors, where they hype up the event on social media and texting with their friends. And, you know, everyone can share pictures of them getting takeout from the ambassador's assigned restaurant. And if you're interested in that, by the way, you should definitely go to WNCAP.org. Just wanted to throw that in there. But yeah, those are the ways that the event is different.
Well, you're answering the question that I was going to ask you then, is that then if I want to get involved, which I'd like to, that aside from having you as a guest on the radio show, best bet then is just go to the website and you'll tell me what
I would direct people to the website, WNCAP.org, WNCAP.org, and our Dine In for Life page is right there up front, and you can see what it's all about and all of the different sponsors that we've had. I do need to give a shout out just because they've been so generous over the years. And again, a local institution, Prestige Subaru over on Tunnel Road, they've been our presenting sponsor for over a decade now, and we're so grateful to them, along with, you know, Avita Pharmacy and Range Urgent Care and all the other places that have supported us. This is a locally funded event that benefits the local community, which is why I love it so much.
And so also, Michael, I know you're also on Facebook too, is that correct?
Absolutely. You can find WNCAP on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn even.
By the way, do me a favor if you can, off the air, send me, I guess, the latest press release on it, because I want to run something.
I sure will.
Or the flyer I want to run in my blog as well. Just tell people
great.
that the nice thing is that by the time the show is going to be aired, this Dine In for Life has like one primary date though, still it's the kickoff of the whole event.
Yeah, the great thing about this year is people can kind of jump in and participate multiple times over the course of the month because there's no shortage on amazing restaurants that you can get takeout from, that participating restaurants. But at the same time, yes, the day of the event that we are really directing people towards is April 29th. That's the last Thursday in April. And on April 29th, we're just going to have, it's just going to be an explosion of stuff online, people posting selfies of themselves at different restaurants. And
I'll do that.
please do, because, I think it's been hard for a lot of people to find a sense of community during this pandemic. And I think we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and we're heading there. But as of currently, right now, I think a lot of folks, are still feeling kind of isolated. And if we can rally together for a common cause, even if we're not quite ready to meet in person yet, I think that's a great thing. That's a great thing for everyone.
So aside from Dine In for Life, WNCAP does a whole bunch of other things. Tell me some other things you're currently doing to, not only get the word out, but just keep doing the stuff you're doing for the last 20 years.
Yes. Oh, yeah. WNCAP has really expanded its portfolio. There's a huge range of services now, which are all free and they're all confidential. You can stop by or make an appointment for a free HIV test or Hep C test anytime. They're very fast. They're easy. Again, they're completely confidential.
By the way, let me just ask you a question on that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was you I met at a workshop. I don't think it was, but I was at a meeting and somebody was offering they were at a booth. I was very impressed, and they were offering some other free test or something. What test was that? It was it was something
HIV or Hep C, hepatitis C.
And you could just do it right there at spot. You didn't have to. They were doing it right there.
Yeah, and I think there are other tests for all different STIs, for example. You can get that at the health department, sort of like a broader spectrum test. We're mostly doing, the HIV and the hepatitis C. But again, yeah, very important to know that information. And we do that, sort of normal business hours, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Harm reduction is also a big thing we do. I talked about that a little bit. I don't know how much people realize that, the opioid epidemic is still ravaging Western North Carolina, and the rate of injection drug use is going up, and the rate of overdoses is going up. And so one thing WNCAP does is we distribute sterile syringes so that people will not contract HIV or hepatitis C. And we also distribute naloxone, which is an overdose reversal medication. And, it's really amazing to hear the stories of people who feel like they've been shut out of society in every other way because they're a drug user. But they feel like they're not judged when they come to WNCAP, and that they can actually come and get their supplies without feeling like someone's looking down their nose at them or thinking that they're a bad person, because we know that people who use drugs aren't bad people. They just are people who use drugs, and we want them to stay alive and stay safe, or at least as safe as possible.
Do you have programs do you have programs that help them break the cycle if they want, or you refer them to other agencies?
Well, the thing about the way that we do harm reduction is it's really client centered. Every person has different goals for what they want. The great thing about something like a syringe exchange program is that oftentimes we're people's only connection back to the wider world. So in fact, a lot of people do end up going to treatment centers through syringe exchange programs like the one at WNCAP. And so if people do want to become clean and sober, abstinent from substances, they can definitely do that. Some people would prefer to switch to MAT, medication assisted therapy, which is a great way to stop or mitigate the injection of drugs. So harm reduction is a very wide field, and I think that helps a lot of people throughout our region.
I love the title too. It's a great way to describe it. Harm reduction. Isn't that a super way to describe it?
Exactly.
You're helping. How could anybody be opposed to that? You're just helping people not harm themselves, I guess.
Everything, a seatbelt in a car is harm reduction.
Right, good point.
Many of us, not all of us, many of us drive cars, and there's always a risk, right, of an automobile accident. That's just an inherent risk in driving. So we can't eliminate that risk entirely unless we all switch to not driving, which sounds very difficult. It might not be as difficult as kicking an addiction to heroin, by the way, but the point is that we're reducing the harm as much as possible with the seatbelts.
Michael, let me ask you about two other things you mentioned to me off the air, but I'll kind of ask you about them in terms of alphabet soup, what I'll call. But there are other terms you throw around. One of them is a PrEP. It's a PrEP. And what does that stand for again?
So PrEP stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is kind of a mouthful in and of itself. That's why we shorten it to PrEP, P-R-E-P. But basically, it's a once daily pill that people can take that actually essentially eliminates your risk of contracting HIV. So, I actually take PrEP. It's a prescription medication. I'm somebody who does not have HIV. I'm HIV negative, and I take PrEP so that I won't become HIV positive. And it's a really important and fairly new tool to ending the HIV epidemic. And sorry, if you're interested, not you specifically, but if anybody is interested, they can come to WNCAP, and we can definitely assist you in finding affordable, possibly even free ways to access PrEP.
And one other, I guess, acronym, but I just kind of like it. Was it U equals U?
U equals U.
What is that?
That's the other. It stands for undetectable equals untransmittable. And what that means is that if you're a person who is HIV positive and you're being properly medicated for your HIV, you can actually get to the point where the amount of virus is so low in your blood that a traditional HIV test can't even detect it. You still have HIV, you haven't been cured of it, but the level of it is so low that you actually cannot transmit it to another person, which is really important because HIV spreads through networks of people, right? So every time a person becomes undetectable, they stop the spread with them, right? And people who are undetectable, by the way, essentially, as I mentioned earlier, can live long and healthy lives. It's a very important milestone that a person can reach. The issue that we find is connecting people with medical care. They can't access it because they lack transportation, they lack, stable housing, any number of factors, but it's really connecting because people still do die of AIDS. It's crazy in the year 2021, but that's true. So we've got to create access for the people who need it.
Michael, if folks want to find out more about some of the programs you mentioned, or find out more about WNCAP, volunteer for the dining program you mentioned earlier, what's the best bet?
I would take people to WNCAP.org. That's WNCAP.org. You can find out more information. You can enter our grand prize drawing, or you can volunteer.
Okay, I'd like to thank you, Michael, Poandl, for being my guest this second half hour on the BLAINESWORLD show. I'd also like to thank Mark Jones, my guest the first half hour, as well as to Amy Prisnash, my producer. Look forward to having you join me next Wednesday here at 9 a.m. on WPVM LP 103.7 Asheville, North Carolina. You can also listen online at WPVMFM.org and watch us on WPVM's Facebook page. And Michael, as always, it was a pleasure again catching up with you. Be well.
Thanks so much, Blaine.
Catch you soon. Okay. Thanks again.
Appreciate it.